Hi, this is a video response to CanadianPatriot1973. It's not even 7 in the morning yet here in France. I woke up incredibly early this morning. This is me before the morning bath and getting dressed and stuff. I must say, when I first started looking at your videos, a long time ago, couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, something like that, I saw something kind of troubled in your face. Something like was preoccupying you. And now that I hear that you're having these issues with anxiety, panic attacks, I'm really not too surprised. And you have these bursts of energy, where you're doing videos and showing us how to do stuff. And you've reminded me of some roommates I've had and some people I have known and some family members I've had. And I sort of thought, whoa, that's kind of almost a sort of manic behavior. But since I've had my own problems myself, that was not a criticizing thing. That was sort of like more recognition. Also, I've had mentally ill roommates, family members, spouses, co-workers, stuff like that. And over the years, there are things that I've noticed, traits and characteristics that I've noticed. It's easier for us to be objective with other people than we are with ourselves. That's quite normal. And I have a lot of formal education in behavior and somewhat in the medical area, somewhat in the therapy area, without getting into my CV and stuff. I do know a fair amount of stuff. And for my own issues, I've had some pretty bad problems in the past with free-floating anxiety, almost bipolar disorder. For a long time, 25 years or something. Finally, well, the jury was always out. They just sort of ended up saying to me, well, you have some tendencies, you're kind of borderline, so this is what you have to do to check yourself. And this is the sort of support you have to have for in case you have a manic episode. I do know a lot about it. I've allowed myself to be medicated off and on for many years, which was pretty much a big mistake. I was entirely too trusting. I didn't really understand how toxic these things are. I mean, now with the internet, I've only had the internet at home since 2007, but now that I have it, it's much easier to do research and to find out about stuff, as you know. And some of the reasons that I had problems in the past was I'm disabled, and a definitive diagnosis, there's nothing globally. There are about 20 different health problems that I have. It may have started with the fact that my mother drank during her pregnancy. I took a polio vaccine when I was 5 years old. I got very sick right after that. I got immune system disorder, and I was sent away to an institution to die. And I couldn't walk and stuff. It was dramatic. And it was misdiagnosed in the early 1960s as being lupus. I did have some of the symptoms, some of the classic symptoms. So I was put on cortisone for many, many, many years, and that is really a heavy and bad medication. So a lot of the problems, I believe that gave me severe sleep apnea. I had no problems before I was on the cortisone. Problems with free-floating anxiety. I also had a lot of personal issues of low self-esteem, which were from a very unhealthy family dynamic, having alcoholic parents. I think my mother has borderline personality disorder. There were things going on in my family, but I pretty much left when I was 18. I'm 54 now, and I've tried to be independent. I have been really independent ever since. Medications really should be only for short-term use. We're talking maybe 6 months maximum. The side effects and the toxic effects are dramatic. In 2008, I was put on Abilify for, well, I guess indefinitely. After 6 months, I developed tardive akathisia, and the damage from that is basically irreversible. It's a horrible, horrible condition. And the doctor, I really believe he was misled. There have been lawsuits and accusations about the Japanese manufacturer of that drug. Just be really careful with that stuff. Now, some of the things you've said have concerned me in the past, and in your recent long 30-minute video about panic attacks and anxiety attacks and stuff like that, you describe being younger and, you know, smoking some pot or having a few drinks or whatever, and you started to freak out and were afraid of losing control. I have a friend, he's been my friend since the 1970s, and we were roommates for about a year and a half, and it worked out quite well. He had a job in another city. We didn't see each other very much. We made good use of the apartment and shared the bills, and we're still friends after all these years. But I noticed him doing things and saying things which indicated to me that he was going to have mental health issues in the future. And no matter how good of a friend you are with somebody, this is a very hard thing to tell them. And I tried to get him to buy a good disability income insurance policy twinned with a good whole life insurance policy, because I was in that business at the time. And he just blew up, and we weren't friends for several years. You know, I really hit a raw nerve when I brought this up with him. Now he's very sorry he didn't listen. He went into debt, he had to file bankruptcy, and he's been disabled ever since about 1995. And he's really suffering. Again, it's hard. I haven't seen him in years and years and years, but we're in touch a lot. He's in the United States. And I think I know what some of his problems are, but it's a delicate subject because I'm not his doctor, right? He had the same feelings that you do about, like, not even wanting to drink beer because he was afraid of losing control. And he was very, like, controlling about his apartment, which is one of the reasons we got along so well. I guess because I come from this dysfunctional family, I usually submit and compromise and accommodate other people. So if I know that they're nutty about this or that, I just accept it and say, okay, relax. You're fussy about that. I will just respect your wishes. So we get along just fine as roommates. And I got my own apartment in the building after that, and we stayed friends. But I had a funny feeling that he was kind of wired in, I don't want to say a bad way, but a potentially bad way. And it turned out to be true. When I got very sick in early 2008, I was basically written off and sent to a place to die. And healthcare is rationed in France, and I'm all for that. They do practice euthanasia here also, and I'm all for that. I've seen it done, and I know people who've had it done. It's very hush-hush here. But basically I was given 3 hots and a cot, and there was no plan for me to survive. So I used the NEEP method, my water cure. A 19th century Bavarian priest figured out this method, which is done in Germany, and their Social Security covers it. France is starting to do it, but they're commercializing it, so it's expensive, you know. Sickness is a business. And that's really silly, because all it involves is cold or tepid water and some basic knowledge of herbs and some very, very, very basic techniques which boost your immune system. And after about 6 weeks of being on death's door, I was using these methods on myself. It's NEEP, K-N-I-E-P-P. And I rallied and ended up staying at this hospice type of place for 12 weeks. And they had a lot of good stuff there. They had art therapy, group therapy, individual therapy with a psychologist. There were psychiatrists on hand. They noticed some things about me. They noticed that I was depressed, which I hadn't noticed. I had been depressed in the past. I cured myself of a long depression by doing research and getting a doctor to allow me to take buprenorphine for a few weeks. A very small percentage of people who are untreatable for depression will respond to opiates, and apparently I'm among that group. 2-3 days after I started taking the stuff, which is a strong med, they use that for getting people off methadone. And I've never been on methadone, and I've never done heroin. But 2 or 3 days later, it was as though a veil had been lifted. And I thought, aha, you know, I have to do the research, I have to show it to the doctors, and I have to persuade them to let me try some offbeat stuff. Because there's no one-size-fits-all for people, for mental health issues, for life, for diets or anything, for nutrition. There are some basic things that we can and should learn about, but nobody else can tell you. Now, it's my understanding that in Australia, parents get a week off, and the government pays for this. And the kids are there, and they're happy, and they're being observed by nurses, by staff. But basically the parents just get to sleep for a week, and they don't have to worry about where their kids are. And when the family eats together or interacts together, the kids are kind of really kept kind of apart from the parents for a week. The staff notices if there are any strange dynamics going on. And I've heard very good reports from Australians about this, and it sounds really good. I wish that every country would do this. I don't have children, but I have been, you know, a nanny, and I've been a teacher of small children, and lots of babysitting since I was a girl. I notice things. And I know that your youngest child is autistic, and that's a tremendous burden on the family. I have to warn you, it's also a burden and a frustration to your other children, because this one child needs so much more. There probably already is some resentment. My current mother-in-law, I'm dead to my French family. I have been for over a year. It's a rather sad situation. I won't go into that. She's very manipulative, and she's always coming on as though she's a pillar of strength, and yet she's very sensitive. And there's a very, very unhealthy dynamic in my husband's family. And for me being the in-law, and my behavior's always been very good with them, because you know how it is with in-laws, you know, one slip up and they'll never forget or forgive you. And this is my third marriage, so I really know about this stuff. I see a very unhealthy dynamic going on in that family, and it's had a very bad effect on them and on my spouse. I have tried to talk to them about this in the past, but at one point I just had to draw the line and say, you know, I'm not a therapist. You must go to therapy. You can see a social worker, whatever. There's a big stigma about that here in France. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but some of your control issues are a kind of you're manipulating things. You're not being willing to let go. It's quite ridiculous that you can't lose sight of your kids, or that you always need to know where they are or who's supervising them. I don't think that's normal. I don't think that's healthy. And I don't really want to hear about, you know, today's world and all this stuff and what can happen. My brother and I were left alone all day, out in the streets, in the inner city, in the suburbs, in the country, with nobody supervising us. And some bad things did happen or could have happened, but it would have really driven us nuts to have this all-powerful parent figure, you know, running things so well in the house. And the kids I grew up with had parents, or one parent who was like this, and it had a very detrimental effect on the family. So as much as I think you should do this for yourself, you should do it for them. I think there's a lot on your shoulders, and you really need a break. You need to get away, which would freak you out, because you couldn't be there running the household. And you might think, oh, they can't get by without me, but maybe they could, and maybe it would be good for them to get some time to yourself, such as what I had in early 2008 for 3 months, where I just, as I was healing, got a handle on myself again. And I was told that I had some very serious self-esteem issues. The main doctor there told me he had never seen anybody with such low self-esteem who was at the same time so accomplished. And he was very mystified. But I have a lot of baggage. In French they call it a lourd passé. I have my reasons. But I realized that he was right, and that it had to stop. I definitely don't have all the answers now. In the past, I was not capable. I was capable of telling those around me that I was suffering and that they were making the situation worse. But I didn't have the coping strategies for managing that correctly. And I've learned a lot since then. And that was a really quite positive time for me. I started doing artwork again. I got much more busy with writing and professional projects and things which were really more important to me. I hope this makes some sense. I'm going to stop because this is too long. I wish you well, and I'm likely to do some more stuff on this, not just for you as a video response, but for myself and for other people. Hang in there, and it's very brave what you've done. I know it wasn't easy for you, but I think you will help a lot of people. And I think you're rational and you're good at filtering what comes back to you, and you will be able to weigh what you hear and what you find out and be better. A lot of people are rooting for you. I know I am. Okay, bye.